Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. You've probably heard of World War II, right? But did you know that in the early 1930s, Australia fought an incredibly bizarre war against emus? Yep, you heard that right. A war between humans and birds. And spoiler alert, the birds won. Let's dive into the Great Emu War of 1932, one of the most absurd military campaigns in history. Now, before we get to the battle, let's understand why the Australian government decided to go to war against emus in the first place. It all started in 1915, when Australia, like many other countries, was recovering from World War I. Farmers in Western Australia, particularly in the wheat-growing areas, were facing economic hardship. The Great Depression was hitting hard, and on top of that, there was another problem: emus. Emus, those large, flightless birds, began to flock to the farmlands of Western Australia in droves. At first, it might have seemed like a harmless occurrence. After all, emus were just hungry birds looking for food. But soon, the emu population exploded. These birds weren't just looking for food. They were devouring crops, trampling through fences, and causing chaos on the farmland. Farmers were losing thousands of pounds worth of crops, and it seemed like the emus were unstoppable. In late 1932, the farmers had had enough. They reached out to the Australian government for help. In response, the government didn't just send in a few people with nets or traps. No, they decided to send in the military. Yes, the Australian Army. Led by Major G.P.W. Meredith, the Australian military sent a small force of soldiers armed with 2 Lewis machine guns and plenty of ammunition. Their mission was simple: eliminate as many emus as possible and stop the destruction of crops. They believed that with military-grade firepower, they'd be able to wipe out the emu population in no time. But, as you'll soon find out, the emus had no intention of being easy targets. The first battle took place in late November 1932. The soldiers, prepared for a quick victory, positioned themselves in an area where they knew the emus would be feeding. But what followed was chaos. First, the emus simply ran. These birds were fast, faster than the soldiers had anticipated. Despite the fact that the soldiers opened fire with their machine guns, they found that the emus were surprisingly agile and difficult to hit. In fact, many of the emus survived the first wave of gunfire, and the soldiers were left frustrated and perplexed. Over the course of several days, the soldiers managed to kill only a small fraction of the emu population. The birds kept fleeing in small groups, and when the soldiers tried to chase them, the emus would scatter in every direction, making it nearly impossible to target them effectively. As the war continued, the soldiers' situation got worse. The emus, seemingly aware of the threat, began to form smaller, more coordinated groups, often running in circles or darting between bushes to make targeting even harder. It wasn't just a game of survival for the emus anymore. They were becoming strategic. And the soldiers, on the other hand, were running low on ammunition. The military, in a desperate attempt to regain control, tried to use trucks to chase down the emus. But the emus were too quick and evasive. It became clear the war was not going as planned, and the emus were winning. After several weeks of failure, and with public opinion beginning to turn against the military's efforts, Major Meredith and his soldiers were forced to retreat. The emus had won. The Great Emu War officially ended in December of 1932. The military gave up, and the emus were left to continue their reign over the wheat fields of Western Australia. Ironically, the government did eventually find other ways to reduce the emu population, but it wasn't with guns. Instead, they used a bounty system to encourage hunting the birds, and by 1934, the emu numbers were finally brought under control. So, what's the takeaway from this bizarre chapter of history? Well, it's certainly a reminder that not everything in war goes according to plan, and sometimes, nature has the upper hand. The Great Emu War might be one of the most ridiculous military campaigns in history, but it shows how determined and resilient animals can be when they're pushed into a corner. Now, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this strange war. Did the emus really win? Or was it a massive failure on the army's part? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe for more strange and forgotten stories from history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.